You're feeling Phoebe. Okay.
It's Friday.
Well, welcome everybody. We are recording. We are ready to rumble, and the topic is exporting. Oh my God, is that important or what? So my name is Doug Brunke. I'm the founder and CEO of Global Chamber, and this is how I started Global Chamber. This was what was in my head. And you're going to hear a lot of passion and information today from 4 expert speakers. And I know they feel the same way. The people that are exporting are extraordinary. They're amazing. They do things. They jump tall buildings in a single bound. And they make a lot of mistakes too, because it's hard. It's not simple. And so we love them and we care for them and we do whatever we can to help them. And part of what today is all about is providing advice around what should they be thinking about for 2022 to get ready, to be more successful, to increase the amount of exports they have. And if there are any folks that are on the sidelines that have been thinking about exporting, or maybe they're an accidental exporter and they haven't really put together a plan, today will be your day to think about, how do I get ready for 2022? So we have these 4 experts, and I'm just really, really happy that they're together here today because I'm ready to learn as well. So let's start. Let me first say that the 4 people are Kathryn Reed, Hank Marshall, Phoebe Rivers, and Elizabeth Glynn, and all of them have special skills in exporting. They work with companies that are exporting, and they've exported many of them themselves. So they are ready, willing, and able to help. So let's start over there in Austria with Kathryn Reed. Kathryn is the consultant partner at Uniconsult, Wick and Partner. It's her own founded company. She helps companies export all over the world. She has particular expertise between Europe and Asia, and the work that she's done in China is just phenomenal. Kathryn, thank you for all that you do. You're going to provide, as the other experts will today, or what should an exporter be thinking about and being prepared for in 2022? We'll have each of you speak, and then we'll have time for questions. And so in the audience, save your questions, post them in the chat room, and we'll have time for those at the end. Kathryn, how's your Friday going? And tell us a little bit more about what exporters should be thinking about.
Well, my Friday, I have the advantage of you guys. My Friday is almost finished. I'm heading into the weekend after this. So
congratulations. It's quite late there, isn't
it? It's not too, it's only 5 o'clock, but let's say for the working day, that's enough.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for joining today. And what are some of your suggestions around tips and techniques, strategies that exporters need to be thinking about in a year that we still kind of don't know exactly what's going to happen, right? There's a lot of new normal conversation, but what does that even mean? And we've got shipping issues. We've got all sorts of world disruption. How do we navigate that?
Yeah, I think, as in many other years, 2022 is one of those years where you basically are going to in some ways, you're going to throw a dart at the board and see what comes out. But I think that there are certainly things that exporters can do to keep their risks down to a minimum. And a lot of them are the things that they should be doing in other years as well. So what I think that they should be doing that's maybe specific to 2022 would be to really look and see how they can perhaps leverage their networks and their collaboration partners to, let's say, to take advantage of the fact that a lot of 2022 is probably going to be virtual as an exporter. And even though travel is going to be coming back, I think that we're still going to be looking at strengthening online relationships a lot. And I think that from a shipping perspective, I'm not like the world's shipping expert, but I think that the days of running on such a 100% lean program that those days are over and people have got to think about planning in an extra buffer along the whole of their supply chain, with their lead times, with their stock levels, in order to avoid some headaches further down the line. But from a regular perspective, as far as planning for the year is concerned, I'm a big supporter of the idea that if you're doing channel sales, then you should, let's say, do a kind of appraisal, or you should do a kind of audit of all of your business partners at this time of year. And you should go through all of them step by step, according to all of the aspects that are important for your export business. And you should develop for each one of them a kind of individual development plan, and to say, okay, this guy, his sales team maybe needs more training. The guy in Singapore, he needs to expand his range in these aspects. In Cambodia, maybe we want to add some additional marketing activities. And I think you can go through, and you can, even if you don't have huge amounts of data out of all of the markets that you're working in, which is often the case, at least in Europe, that you can use the data that you have, qualitative data, to actually make very good decisions based on where you need to go and where you need to place your focus. And I think less is more. So it's better to focus on a few key markets rather than to try what the Germans would call the watering can approach, where you just kind of hold it over the top and sprinkle and nothing actually gets done, let's say. So those would be my very top tips. Although I think that companies also need to think about very tactical things like higher travel budgets than they've had in the last couple of years, to maybe compensate for some of the things that they need to catch up on a little bit. But I'm sure my colleagues have got a lot of things to also say, so I don't want to hog this conversation too much.
Great. No, that's great information. Leverage networks, add a buffer to your supply chain, or add buffers and audit partners. And I love the idea of putting together plans for each one, right? Where are the gaps? What are the challenges? And then making kind of the next step improvements in the coming year. Very good. Let's now move to Hank Marshall. He's the Economic Development Executive Officer of the City of Phoenix. He is so unusual in terms of people that have that kind of a role, because he works really intimately with companies. He's helping on foreign direct investment and helping companies land within the United States, but he's also helping exporters. And I know he's a very passionate person, but also very knowledgeable person, to be able to help and inspire companies to be more successful with their exporting. And so that's why I asked Hank to come here today. He's also the chair of the Global Chamber Phoenix Advisory Board. Thanks, Hank, for your leadership. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Doug. And Kathryn, thank you for your comments. I've had to change my comments because some of yours were very consistent with mine. First, it's a privilege to be with Kathryn, Phoebe, and Elizabeth. This topic is very important to me, and it's something that I try and make sure that, both from my government perspective and from my past experience in the private sectors, to make sure that people fully understand this. And I'm going to add the typical disclaimer here that this is Hank Marshall's opinion. It may not be consistent with the city or their thinking, but you know me, Doug, I have to add this because sometimes I can get in trouble. I look at 2021 and I would say that, trade has resumed. Okay, and that's a pretty simple word. There's a huge imbalance. You've watched U.S. consumerism clog ports. We've watched trade deficit, get to exorbitant levels. And that's just something to be mindful of. And I have two buckets, if you will. One I call constraints. So from an exporter's point of view, you've got things like transportation, supply chain, labor, things that are weighing on you that in some instances you have no control over. Okay, they are what they are, and to mitigate them is in some cases very difficult. And then I have what I call influencers. And these are the things that, again, in cases just control, weigh on your efficacy, if you will, of an exporter. And those things include, COVID-19. Let's be frank. I think Kathryn mentioned that we are not out of the woods. It is curtailing a lot of things. You've got what I would call varied economic recovery. There isn't a consistent way that countries around the world have recovered. Some haven't recovered at all. Some are stuck in some position. I would argue North America, Europe, perhaps Asia a little bit are certainly ahead of everybody. But let's be honest, there isn't a consistent way, and that weighs in on our particular countries that we may wish to sell to. Okay, their appetite to do that. Let's throw in things like energy and oil. Okay, these things are starting to confuse everybody. It is another overlay. Add in what the U.S. is experiencing currently in the way of an inflation that's twice the expected levels that people were looking at. I saw an expert yesterday say that may remain here until 2023. Let's see. A favorable exchange rate for now, for most people. And let's throw in another curveball. How about the 2022 election? Okay, elections have a way of eroding confidence. And I'll get into that a little bit later if we get a chance to do that. How about weather? Okay, the weather this year provided some unexpected disruption. East Coast, Southeast, I mean, it was unimaginable. We had weeks and weeks that the Mississippi was shut down. Ports in Houston, on the East Coast, completely upset, all the way up to New York. Throw in geopolitics. I don't want to go into that bucket too deeply, but that is influencing things immensely. And then at the end, I said, the overarching, what I call, uncertainty, lack of clarity, the missing confidence that exporters have can be a problem. I'm going to curtail some of my comments. So I'm calling 2021 a regroup year. Everybody's trying to figure out, how do I maintain something that I used to have? May not be ideal, but I'll somehow regroup. 2022, from my perspective, is not going to be a good year or a bad year. It's going to be what I'm calling a rethink year. I will expand on some of those comments that Kathryn indicated. It's going to be doing a deep dive into your network and what you do to assess. So it's a rethinking, okay? And mainly because I think the constraints and influences are going to continue to conspire against exporters in whatever way that you want to kind of figure that out. It's still going to be an overlay that just won't go away. And I'm going to say that in my mind, again, my opinion, 2023 is what I'm going to call a rebound year. I'm not going to call it a recover year because, frankly, I don't think people are going to recover anything. What you're going to wind up doing in your future years will look distinctly different than what you used to do because of a lot of things. You'll go back to what Kathryn said. Maybe you have more stock on hand. Maybe you rethink who your suppliers are. You regionalize things. But to me, it's going to be a rebound year. Some tips and opportunities. I think services are at the top of the list for the U.S. I think they're trending upwards. Goods are struggling, mainly because of the infrastructure. Services will do very well because they're not constrained by the infrastructure and the things that we've recently talked about. On a goods perspective, my bullish prediction is I think Mexico will be good, namely because I think a lot of regionalizing will come back to Mexico. Mexico is extremely bullish on whether it's from Asia. There will be things setting up in Mexico to service North America. And right now, Mexico is completely underwater from a supply point of view. So there will be an opportunity to do that. I think Europe, I would pick as a second market. Why? Because I think they've got high vaccination rates. They've done work well in, and I'll speed it up here so I don't get into too many other people's minutes here, but they've also done well with stimulus. I think that they're spending. I think Europe is a very robust place. My new normal, I would call it is what the prevailing reality is, as I would call it, because I think there is no such thing as a normal. It's what is the prevailing reality and how do you adapt to that? So I think my strategy, if you will, is for a much deeper engagement and communication with the people that you as an exporter work with. This is entirely consistent with what Kathryn said, is use them, leverage them to understand what the reality is. What do I need to do? What do you need to do so that our mutual success? So let's make sure that we understand this is a mutual success. You sell, they resell, everybody in this chain benefits. Keep that in mind, okay? And I would say, leverage the chamber. Leverage the chamber's networks to do that. That's why we're here, is to make sure that that's not forgotten. And then here's one thing I tell exporters too. It's my final comment, and I like to use the mining ideology, and mines are fascinating. If you own a mine and your commodity is of value at any point in time, you mine. If the commodity price is down, you shut the mine down. Okay, it's not going to spoil, it's not going to go bad, but it's what I tell exporters is be mindful. There is no obligation to export. You do it because it makes sense. You do it because there's value to you and the people that you work with. And it's consistent with what Kathryn said. Maybe you don't do the shotgun approach. Maybe you don't do all the markets you've currently done. Taper down to the ones that make sense, the ones that you can have success, and ultimately minimize your risk. That's it for me. I could talk all day, but I won't. There's some brighter minds that have yet to speak.
So this year has been regroup. Next year is rethink. And then 2023 is recover, rebound. And rethink, I presume, means also rethink maybe what products and services you're offering, what markets you might be going into. Are those the things that you're thinking about there?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, rethink, and I think introspectively at companies, rethink your ability to rededicate yourself to exporting. I mean, it may require new skills. It may require new resources. It may require something that you never had, because I think, as Kathryn said, that this was, in many instances, exports were on autopilot for a lot of people. It was just happening. And I think the rethinking is also introspectively. How are you up for this? Are you really going to be able to meet the needs to be in the game? It's a different game. So again, I'll try and stop talking so much. So thank you very much, Doug.
No worries at all. Our next speaker is Yvonne Rivers. She is the CEO at Phoebe Global, and she's affectionately named Phoebe as well. And so Phoebe, we're feeling the power of exporting to here today, and you help people, companies all over the world be successful. I'm just so in admiration for all the things that you do around the world. Please let us know a little bit more about your thinking here. What should exporters be thinking about in getting ready for 2022?
Thanks so much, Doug. Yes. And I start with 2020 was a great, robust year for a lot of businesses around the world. So I don't discount that it didn't work in 2020. A lot of people went out of business. And I will say that your stability and your longevity is always based on how sustainability you are with your revenue, with your ideas, with your mission. First thing, maximize your revenue. Deal with the customers, wherever countries that are your customers. I hear a lot of times people will come to me and say, well, I want to go global. Okay, well, what does that really mean? And then sort of alluding to what some other comments have been said, you've got to focus on where you're going to make your most money. And I use a terminology, don't leave any money on the table. And that simply means is being able to be flexible to really adjust and serve your customers to be the maximum responsibility or maximum revenue from those customers. Then if you increase your customer, you reduce your customer acquisition costs, your CAC, and increase your revenue. That way you're thinking smart. So I call all years our smart thinking years for entrepreneurs, whether you're global, whether you're domestic and all that. And you really have to have that plan. We needed to plan before. We need to plan continually. And I really don't say it's even more that you need it, but the biggest mistake I see that entrepreneurs and business owners will make, whether you're dealing domestically or global, that you may set a goal for yourself for 2022, 2023, but you have not written out that detailed roadmap. Now, I live in the East Coast of the United States, okay? If I want to go from Washington, D.C. to Miami, Florida, I need to know whether Miami is north, south, east, or west. I can't say 2022, we're going to do $500,000, $1 million, $2 million. How exactly are you going to do it? And you have to put it together in a plan. Who are your not only best customers, but most revenue producing customers? So if I have to say 2021 is a year of assessment and really getting rid of the dead weight that has not really produced for you, coming up with your proposals in 2022 to maximize and work with those who's going to give you the most, because you may be making some money. Because I ask people, well, who's your target customers? Well, that's everybody. And everybody's not your customer. Even if they say 20 to 55, who do you get the most from with the least cost? It's about people, process, and profits. You need to know the people to work with. You need to know the processes you're putting in place with your team, and you need to know what likely profits will come out of that. That will itself will set you up to have a really working strategic winning plan. You've got to market yourself. The other side of it, I see other business owners who you may have particular goods or products and you don't know marketing. Get a marketing expert, because a lot of times people will say, well, I'm doing this, this, and this, but is it a plan? Or is it just something that you want to do? Have you tested and measured? You have to test and measure and see how productive each and everything you do. Anything that we're doing that we don't see the results for, my team will tell you that we'll have meetings and what have we gotten from this and this, and we will tweak it, modify it so we can maximize our revenue, because time is money. So right now, 2021 is a year of assessment to prepare for a year of success in 2022.
I love what you said about marketing and how important that is. And when you said that, what resonated with me is, market research including, right? Not just,
Absolutely.
Hey, I've got this thing and I'm going to be kind of assaulting you with it. It's understanding how the markets are shifting. And you've seen so much, we've all seen so much shift in the market, right? I mean, it's hard to grasp, right? It's because we walked into 2021 with an idea of what the markets look like.
Right.
And they changed this year, right? They're evolving.
The only thing constant is change, Doug. So prepare for it. I mean, so that's why I'm not discounting what's happening, but it's like that is something that happens anyway. And you're so on it when in fact, therefore, we don't know what the markets are. As I say, in fact, I think I was on one of the global sessions probably a couple of weeks ago. I got some calls from people. Well, I'm thinking about going global and I want to talk to you. And I had questions for them. Have you done your market research? What countries do your products and service will do well? No. Have you tied into all the resources that are out here? You need to know what resources, and I'll tell people, whatever country you're in, whether you're in Austria, US, Europe, Africa, Australia, or whatever, there are resources. Tie into those that are already there for you. That's like making your time work for you.
Great information. Thank you. We're going to get deeper into that in the Q&A section. So thank you for bringing that topic to the fore. Our fourth and last speaker is Elizabeth Glynn. She's both a speaker and advisor at EMG Global Business Solutions. She's an advocate for exporting. I love her passion, as all of us are. And Elizabeth, I think in particular, to me, exemplifies those that have seen that there are not enough people exporting, and that there's a lot of hidden gems and diamonds. And actually reminds me, I remember when I was forming Global Chamber, I think there was one marketing campaign that was around diamonds all around our feet. So these manufacturers are doing their stuff and they're selling down the street, and yet there's all these diamonds that they're missing. And those are different country markets all around the world, and they don't see them. And Elizabeth, thank you for sharing your expertise today, and also just every day being both passionate and smart, helping exporters see those diamonds and be more successful. What would you like to add to the conversation today? Oh, you might be on mute.
Sorry, it's a pleasure to be here. I just want to reinforce what my colleagues have shared. As Kathryn said, it's being aware that idea of watering doesn't work. Let's be focused. What Hank has said, I typically work with manufacturers, and to Doug's point, I always tell them that they're sitting on gold, their own products, because the demand for their products overseas is significant. It's a matter of identifying where the opportunity is. And to Phoebe's statement, that idea of doing the global market research, absolutely critical. I mean, you can be, I have a company that was exporting to 22 markets, got focused, and 1 year, one market increased sales by 1,200%. There's no reason, and it's not a huge company. It's considered a small company. There's no reason why all of our companies can't be doing it. And I just want to share on the supply chain issue. I would urge, if those companies working with their freight forwarders, make sure that they're working with freight forwarders that are tied to contracts with the steamship lines, because that will increase it will improve the likelihood that they will be able to access space, because space right now on the export side is out of the US is a little bit tight. Other things that I would, when I talk to companies, also key point, the export plan, the strategy, the roadmap, it's critical. It provides companies, be it service or manufacturing, the roadmap to move forward and it helps them to figure out who they need to connect with, so that when they connect with resources, we're all available. If we don't know, we can refer you to the right connections. And that's critical. I would say companies that are doing some exporting, these are opportunities for them. I would encourage them to go ahead and look and review what their current export activity is, and then look to see, is there opportunity to expand that business? A lot of companies aren't pushing that. And oftentimes I've found that foreign buyers are the ones, they find these companies and they're the ones driving the business. We need to have our companies integrate exporting into the planning process, so that it's easier to deal with, and they formulate a process so that it makes it easier for everybody involved within the organization, and identify the top markets, and then pursue one or two markets and build out those relationships. If they're companies that are looking brand new to export, absolutely key that they have the market research. And there's a lot of resources out there. It does take a little bit of time, but it's time well spent. And in exporting, it's critical to invest the time, the resources, and at least some staff, so that you can move forward. Okay, thank you.
That sounds good. You mentioned about making decisions about where to go next, and Phoebe talked about the same thing. Is there a process that you recommend on how to do that? Is there one solution to figuring that out? You know, we have members that have different like software solutions, and I've seen the different government agencies have processes around that. Is there a particular one that you recommend, or what would you say around that?
For the companies that are already doing some exports that are not seasoned exporters, I would look at the current activity. Where do you see growth? Can it be expanded? Okay, have you built out the relationship? Are there other products that the foreign buyer should be aware of? And it's interesting because I have these conversations and these companies are completely unaware. Another aspect is what markets, where have you received new business in the last year? What are you doing with that? Have you reached out to the buyer, or you just forwarded the product? I mean, that you could be nurturing. They could be nurturing relationships much easier than building out. I tend to like to work with the companies and find out where they are currently, and then let's see if we can build out based on what they have, and then also utilize the government agencies for market research, because that can be helpful.
Okay. And so it takes someone smart and experienced like you to sort through that, because as we know, one of the biggest issues is the accidental exporter. They're suddenly realize they're exporting to Germany. And so the logical answer is, well, let's develop a plan and let's start with Germany. And that may not be the right answer, as you and I know, but and everybody here on the panel knows. I'm wondering if anybody else has any thoughts around, you know, processes that you've used or to help exporters. Is it really a custom case by case, or are there formulas for figuring this out?
Doug and the rest of the panel, I would say there's a combination thereof. And I actually teach classes on how to go global, whether you're just getting into it or whether you're already in it, you want to grow. And one of the first things, because most people go with where they want to travel, they will say,
Mhm.
I want to go global. You know, they may say, I want to go global in Australia, simply because they want to go to Australia. That may not be your market, you know, and so I do have a process. And it tying into what Elizabeth just said, I use all resources, country trade.gov. They have country profiles based on your services and products, and they will offer some services themselves. Because actually, my focus when I got started maybe 13 years ago, I really had some background, but then again, it's like, how do you get to these people? How you set it up? How you determine which ones are the best for you? That you need to do, because the accidental exporter is a person who may sell something on their website to someone in Germany or whatever. And now, because I have a client, she's actually East Coast of the United States. She had a patent for these snow mittens, and she really was shut down or felt as if she didn't have a market, but maybe 9 months out of the year. And I said, it's cold somewhere all the time. But you have, so we develop a marketing strategy. So now she's selling her gloves in Finland and Iceland and Russia and so forth. Purposeful marketing, because you can't cover yourself. And I like the idea of what you're saying too, Doug, is most of people, a statement I make, and I think this is true, that 95, if United States, based on the United States, 95% of customers in the world are outside of the United States. It's 330 million people in the US. It's 7.9 billion. It's about numbers. It's about numbers. And you got to look at where are the number or your target demographic. That's where you go. I don't care if you don't want to travel to that country. I've been to Russia, haven't been to Russia physically, but virtually, because I had people there. Got a translator. So we in 4 continents and we train in 5 languages. I only speak 1.5, but I have people who do. So you put in place all the things you need to be successful.
Hey, Doug, can I weigh in real quick and just add a real quick comment, because I know Elizabeth wants to jump in here too, is I would urge a lot of these comments, these companies, if you will, to simply ask for help. Okay, it's one thing to know that the resources are out there, but I want to tell you, you have to first come to the complete realization that you don't know what you don't know, and then ask. I'll give you an example here in Phoenix. These 2 companies were across the street from one another. They had no idea that either one exported. One that was exporting to 2 different countries. Interestingly enough, both of them wanted to export to the country that the other company was connected to. Lo and behold, they wound up meeting each other somewhere locally, found out that they were both exporting, and then they wound up figuring out how they could support each other and get the other one into the market that they were in. So fundamentally, I think it's like an AA moment. I need help. It really is, because then you look at the resources you have here today that are out there. It really is a matter of asking for help, because it's not meant to be Darwinian. If you figure it out, you're great, and if you don't, you die. That's not the option.
Yeah, I like that. They're typically smarter than the average company folks, but they need more help. So it's somewhat counterintuitive, right? It's really, but that's where emotional intelligence comes in, right? I think is that the people that are probably a little smarter hopefully have also emotional intelligence, and they're willing to ask for help. You know, so many of us, and I'll count myself, we don't ask questions because we don't want to appear to be, we should know that, right? Well, with international business, there's a lot that all of us don't know. And so there's no fear of asking. One thing that Elizabeth mentioned that reminded me of someone we both know at the head cover company, which I'm blanking on the name of it. Daphne's, right? Daphne's head covers. She said the same thing, right? She was successful in the US and just figuring out its golf industry. And suddenly, you've got the North and the South happening. So why not be able to now sell all through the year? Because somebody's playing golf all 24/7 everywhere in the world. So that's the way a good exporter looks at it. What other comments do you have on this topic?
I was just going to say, I just want to really drive the point that all our panelists have shared. Exporting is a growth opportunity. Companies that have been exporting through this downturn have weathered the economic transition more easily than fully domestic companies. So remember, it is a growth opportunity. And it also, when you diversify markets, because not all markets are going to move at the same time, you're reducing risk. So from a business perspective, it makes sense to be involved in exporting.
No question. Kathryn, did you have something to add there?
Yeah, I was just going to underline that. I mean, in 2008, when a lot of markets were, let's say, not in their best state, I was employed at that time, and we were focused very strongly on Central and Eastern Europe. And I mean, I could say that our business, yes, we were badly affected at that time, but we didn't have some kind of company crash, simply because not all of our markets were in recession at the same time. So maybe first of all, and you could see it go like a wave across the continent as different markets went into it and came back out of it again. And I think even during 2020, you could see that some markets were more deeply closed down right at the beginning, and then they came out and were more active again. And I think it's really true to say you're never going to have the whole world completely closed down at exactly the same time. I mean, I have like a giveaway on it with a kind of step-by-step of ideas of where people can look as to getting information. I mean, compared to the US, Austria is so small that really a lot of companies export, but a lot of companies see export first of all as Germany, and they don't necessarily look that much further, whereas Austria is ideally placed to sell also into Central and Eastern Europe. But I mean, you know, with a domestic market of 8 million, then you have to export, because it's not that easy to survive if you don't.
You're in a country where 55% of GDP is exporting, where in the US it's only 12%. Are there things that you see in Austria that maybe either the country or the ecosystem does there that we can learn from?
I think partly with the education system that Austria has, it's, if you are in an exporting company and you look for somebody to do basic export admin, you can find an 18-year-old straight out of high school who will have a basic knowledge of international trade and how it works. So I think it starts there, and the fact that the chambers within Europe, not only in Austria, they all promote very strongly professional qualifications in export. So it's quite typical to find people in organizations who haven't fallen into it and just learned it along the way. They might have fallen into export in the same way that people fall into sales, yeah. But they will have had some formal training on it somewhere along the way at the beginning of their careers. So you do find a lot of people who are very well versed in, let's say, the building blocks of how to export. But on the other hand, the disadvantage with that is that people are often then unwilling to ask for help because they think that they know more than they do. So
that's
swings and roundabouts.
Universal, isn't it? It's called human nature.
Yeah.
Doug, I have a suggestion for the United States, and I have made my comments known to some government agencies. That's why I'm in my disruptive name, Phoebe, today. The Small Business Administration, okay? They don't have an emphasis on international. They have the staff there, and you've got different agencies up under that, or different federal agencies, but they're not focused on for this U.S. businesses to truly learn international trade. And I've had conversations, talk with them, they know me and whatever. And a lot of times they'll ask me the question, well, Phoebe, how do you go global? I learned to do it. I learned it. I did my market research. I developed the steps. I developed a plan. That's why I do training now on teaching others how to go global. And United States has to really emphasize the numbers, because people will have, I think people have this idea, well, wow, going global, I don't know, I don't want to live there. I mean, it's just this idea and that mindset that I don't think get it. but you can export services and goods if you develop a strategic plan. There are 197 countries in the world. So it's like, make it work for you. It's marketing is about numbers. I tell you, say it again, it's about numbers.
Yeah, and so if you're an exporter watching this, any of the four people here can be a resource for you relative to that path. Hank, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, listen, 1% of U.S. companies export. So let's be perfectly clear here. I mean, it's the pink unicorn in the U.S. that exports. Go back to our topic yesterday when we had a discussion. American companies are no different than what I think Kathryn said about Austria. They can sell stuff to Colorado. They can sell it to economies within the United States that rival global economies. Okay, and I'm not advocating that that's an alternative, because I will agree completely with Elizabeth that by being global and having global clients, it does give you some bit of a stability when things change. You've got a completely different market and you're not tied to the US one. But similar to, I think, what Phoebe's saying, and you've heard me say this for decades now, that I continue to try and hammer home the fact that exports in the US, I think the number I gave you yesterday, Doug, in 2009, exports contributed 9% of US GDP. Right now, they contribute 12%. So let's just be honest. In 31 years, it's not moving the needle. Okay,
No.
we need to. And I don't have an answer for you. I wish I did, because if I did, I'd be out in the middle of the street lighting my hair on fire. But I don't. I think it's a collective effort by everybody here and everybody else to beat this drum, put it in front of people, get them to try it, because it's worth it. It's worth doing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think, one of the things that I'm thinking about, is our continents like Africa, where clearly there are sorry I had a call coming in. I think about Africa, where they have exports, and in fact I believe Nigeria is somewhere around 35% of their GDP is exports. There's a different thing going on there, right? There are raw materials that they're exporting. The relative size of the rest of the economy isn't very high. So one of the things that suppresses the percentage for the US is the fact that we have a lot of other things going on. But I think we all recognize that the different locations around the world, the US needs to be more cognizant of the world. In Africa, they need to have training programs like what Kathryn talked about that Austria has, where there's a mindset around exporting, and not just exporting raw materials, but products that are further along in the chain. Kathryn, I'm sure you see that in all the different countries you work with, and Phoebe as well, right? You're working with sometimes with people that their mindset is growing a product in the ground and getting it out of the country. Absolutely. When a lot of the value can be created there locally. And there's another step in the process, isn't there?
Mm-hmm. And just as you say, whether it's cocoa butter or whatever that you're growing and so forth to export. With Africa, and I work a lot in Africa, actually probably about 7 to 8 different countries that I have a ground stand in, and it's working with them producing and exporting. But with Africa, it's building themselves up, because it can help each other become self-sufficient. So that's a big part of what I do, that we have collaborative partnerships with people on the ground. And these people on the ground, I'm typically working with SMEs and training them how they can really make a living. And so that's making a living either through services or products that they may have, whether they sell them within the continent of Africa, all 54 countries, or whether they export it. It's about sustainability. According to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, you've got to have it specifically saying how you're going to do this. And that's what I mean when I say maximize, and don't leave any money on the table, because I don't think a lot of people have a broad, holistic thought of, I'm in business, and even though I may be selling this particular one, what are some other partnerships, collaborative partnerships I can tie in with that all of us can win? It's a win-win situation, but you got to get in the game. You got to get into the game.
Use the tribe. I've heard that over and over again from all of you, talking about the network and how important the network is more than ever. Mm-hmm. When the markets are this dynamic, you can't go it alone. You have too many thoughts in your head that are antiquated, right? All of us. So we have to be engaged in some sort of a productive way. The problem is we're all busy. We're all too busy. And so how do you get that information? So hopefully we can solve that problem. I do need to kind of wrap up because we have another meeting coming up. So what I'd like to do is go around the room and preface, or have you say any final comments that you'd like to share. I'd like to preface that with thinking about maybe 3 different groups, maybe 4 groups of exporters that are planning for 2022. Number one group, and the one that we think about a lot and work with a lot, are the people that are already in multiple countries. So they're in 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 or more countries, and now they're continuing to move forward. The Axon, the taser company here in Scottsdale, Arizona, that is in many countries, and many of our members are that way. They're at a different place, right? They have an established track record and they need to keep moving. The second group would be either the accidental exporter or somebody who just got a very low amount of exports and really hasn't been through that process of where do I go next? How do I adapt my business? And so they need something a little bit different, right? And then the third group would be the dreamers. I've got a business, a lot of Kathryn or Elizabeth that you talked about of like, hey, you manufacturers in Southern California, wake up. You're not exporting and you need to be. I would say those are into 2 different groups. One are the ones that are relatively prepared. They're thoughtful, they're well-grounded, they already have a solid business, they're smart, they have emotional intelligence, they've got kind of the right parameters. And then the other group, I got reminded of yesterday in LinkedIn. I saw somebody who isn't doing very much exporting, and they did something like really small, like a website or something. And I made a comment, and it was like, oh, don't worry, more. That's just one thing. Many more great things ahead. And I've kind of seen that some people are kind of like always doing the dreaming and somewhat delusional about their capabilities in the world and aren't really listening and really aren't doing the market research that we talked about earlier. So think about those in your final comments. How do we deal with each one of those? Maybe a minute or 2 each because of the time constraint. Who would like to go first?
I'll go first. For those who are already exporting, I go back to, as I say, assess what you're exporting and your profitability. Are you making a profit and how you can possibly increase that? Or replicate, and I say replicate in other countries if you can, because if you have a good, viable business model, that's pretty much what I did for 13 years ago. I was been doing this for 30 some years. So I had my model, but I had to replicate and customize it and modify as I went global. So if you're already doing, then see how you can just with your same footprint. So Doug, you referred to for is how do people do it? There are systems. You've got to develop a system. And you may think I'm harping, but the marketing system or how you can expand. That's a big part of it. So some of you may just have one thing that you're looking to do, and maybe you've traveled somewhere. You've got, before COVID, travel itself. Whether I was going somewhere to do work with someone on the ground, speaking and so forth, I always tied into the country representatives, whether it's like Rwanda Development Board, ministries of SMEs, Ministry of Trade. I have grown my network that way. That they nail, and they call me Phoebe, and they know what I do. I've got so many different collaborations with that. So build on what you have with that. And for those who really just got a thought,
and don't leave money on the table.
Don't leave money on the table.
Well, yeah.
Don't leave, because they're part of the conversation. Because my last international travel was 2019. I'm in Rwanda. I'm sitting with the Women's Governors Council of Rwanda. She works for the whole Rwanda. And she was telling me about a project she wanted me to work on. And I'm like, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? Other things came up. So you don't know until you ask, because otherwise you're sitting over in a corner being able to do different things and people don't know that. That's where marketing comes in there. But again, that last person who you're thinking about going global, that's why I say decide where you're best to go, not just decide I'm going to go somewhere. Someone recently said, well, I just hired somebody in South Africa. I'm like, what? She's in Florida. Oh, they're going to clueless. That's all the word, fullest.
And get help. We only have 3
Yes.
minutes left, so I'll ask you each, the 3 remaining, just in a minute, just to wrap up. Elizabeth, would you like to go?
Quick, yes, I have 2 points to make. Leverage trade shows, you know, often even in your own home country, because often a lot of foreign buyers come. So and right now there are a lot of virtual trade shows. That's one opportunity. And I always tell exporters, there are only 3 reasons to export: access to new customers, increase sales, boost profit. That's your motivation.
All good.
Fantastic. Great points. Kathryn?
I would say don't assume that all of your markets or that all markets are created equal. Just because a market is big in terms of population, it doesn't mean that it's going to be the right market for you. Sometimes a smaller market gives you a much more blue ocean opportunity with less competition, and it could be the right one for you. So make your strategic plan, get the help that you need, and really break it all down into small steps that you really can achieve and feel like you're making progress on it, and then just go ahead and do it and enjoy the ride.
Fantastic. Great thoughts. Hank, final thought.
Hey, so I want to put my my longstanding engineer hat on, and my final 2 comments are: wherever you are, whoever you are, wherever you're, is be intentional. Okay, this isn't about crossing your fingers and being serendipitous about it. Is be intentional. And secondly, along the way, all the time, measure your success, measure the outcomes. Because again, if you're not trying to, you know, when you're comparing markets. So my 2 comments are: be intentional and be a steward, and fully understand the outcomes of your efforts and adjust accordingly.
Great tips and thoughts from all of you. Really appreciate this today. We're going to wrap up now. Those of you out there, if you haven't been able to or can't get a hold of any of the speakers, first of all, certainly try LinkedIn. And secondly, you know, let us know if we can help. info@globalchamber.org. Thank you all for your support, collaboration, knowledge, expertise, and for sharing today. We encourage you to jump into other activities that get you further along. We're ending a little bit early today because we have a New York City, Brazil conversation that's starting right now. If you're on video, you missed it. But if you're live, jump over there and learn more about opportunities between the US and Brazil. Thanks, everybody. Have a great Friday and a great weekend. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.